Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. We're talking today about recruitment for ALF Oregon. This is a cycle that we go through every year. And the beauty of our recruitment process is that it comes directly from senior fellows. So you are actively creating the future of ALF Oregon and also bringing folks into this experience that you see as exciting, generative, upcoming, and established leaders in your area. So it's an exciting time. And I love recruitment because I love people. And ALF Oregon is all about who's in the room and how we gather together. So it's a big, big deal. So thank you so much for being a part of it. Today, we're going to talk about the current fellows program. We're going to talk about the nominating process, and then we're going to brainstorm some fellow candidates in your area. And of course, we'll have questions that you'll bring to the table that we'll answer. And thank you. Some of you sent in questions ahead of time, so I'll address those as best I can. First, though, whenever any of us are gathered together, I like to do a land acknowledgement. And so I would like to just offer that today I'm standing on the unceded lands of the Nimiipuu people whose ancestors have resided here for time immemorial. It seems a little redundant to say Nimiipuu people because Nimiipuu means the people. I'm here in far eastern Oregon, and many indigenous peoples thrive in this place, alive and strong, including the Umatilla, the Cayuse, the Walla Walla tribes, all of whom make their home along the Snake River and the Eagle Cap Wilderness. And despite ongoing erasure and genocide, these local tribes are sovereign, and I'm a guest here. And this is always at the front of my mind when I do my work. And part of my work to be in right relationship with the tribes of this area is not only to honor the wealth and knowledge of these people, but also to unlearn the devastating tools of their colonizers from which I descend. I also engage in reparations personally, and I donate my time and monthly portions of my income to the Nimiipuu Protecting the Environment organization and also an organization called Nez Perce Walawa Homelands. These are two grassroots Nimiipuu-led coalitions that are organizing around time-honored traditions and sustainable environmental practices. And they also protect tribal lands and tribal treaty rights within their own ceded areas and beyond. And it's really my honor to be in relationship with these tribes and these communities. And I share this with you just as a point of transparency and also in the hope that you'll join me in supporting your own local tribes in ways that are meaningful, accountable, relational, and generative. If you know the names of the tribes in your area, please feel free to pop them in the chat or you can say them out loud. And if you don't know the tribes in your area, this is a really wonderful, accessible tool that I'm popping in the chat. It's nativeland.ca, and this is a map of the world, and it'll let you know which Indigenous tribes are in your area. My name is Sarah Greenman, and I'm really new to this job. I'm the executive director of ALF Oregon, and I come to this work with an open and listening heart. I was a fellow last year, so I have a really recent experience of the ALF fellow journey. My background is as an artist and storyteller and community organizer, and I also have deep experience in operations and facilitation. And so my inquiry is always through a really robust justice lens, but I also live in rural Oregon, so that is also my lens, is a rural one, especially in the state of Oregon. Any thoughts or questions before I dive into the current fellows program and what's happening right now for us? Feel free to just unmute yourself. This can be a conversation. You can also use the chat. Great. So there are a lot of things. We have folks here who are from many classes ago and people who are here from classes right now. So we have a wide range of people listening. So I just want to cover some things that remain the same about the ALF Oregon Leadership Cohort Program. The structure is loosely the same. We have an orientation in July where we gather and get to know each other. Then we meet again in August for a one-week community building opportunity in nature. And at that time, we really deep dive and start to get to know each other and better understand the core yearning of the group that is assembled. And we also deliver equity, inclusion, diversity, and justice work to them to just give them a baseline for how they want to interact together. And this is also about creating trust and building relationship for the really beautiful work that lies ahead. And then we travel monthly around the state, as we always have, weekends in places all across the state. And when we get there, we engage with community leaders, usually in the morning. And those are folks that we've met through our ALF network. Sometimes they are ALF senior fellows themselves. And it's usually, as Kelly will say, we're trying to figure out what's the right like alchemy of the moment. And so it's about who's available and who's interested in talking about current issues, and also what's emergent for the class, what they're interested in. We really like to watch what they're curious about, what lenses they're looking through, and to provide a sort of window into the communities through their lens as well. It's really a dialogue. And so that's our Oregon focus in the mornings. And then usually in the afternoons, we do a class focus. And this is more curricular, and this is facilitated by our faculty. And for many of you who have been with us in the last 7 to 10 years, Cliff Jones and Nancy Davis are still working with us and are delivering a curriculum that was largely developed by Cliff Jones and his group, Capacity Partnerships. So that's still very much all in place. But there are some things that have changed pretty drastically in the recent years. My 3 predecessors, all women of color, were looking through their own lived experience, and we're bringing a really robust anti-racist lens to the work. And we understood, especially through their eyes, that there were some big changes that needed to happen in terms of facilitation, and also how we brought our groups together and who was at the table. So our work, I will say, has grown in the last 7 years drastically in terms of diversity, who's at the table. We also have a more emergent style of facilitation that really attends to the group's core yearnings and their own requests for engagement. So there's a kind of agency that the classes have over how they interact and how long we spend talking about what and what is coming up for them. This sort of more attentive style of facilitation seems to be working in the past couple of years. And there's still a ways for us to go. So in the coming year, we're going to be changing up our facilitation model. This is part of my work coming in as the new executive director, was to sort of assess our facilitation model and look at what's working and what isn't. And so we're probably moving to a co-facilitation model. And we've just recently hired a new facilitator, faculty member. Her name is Toni Tabora Roberts, and she works with Esper House and was a fellow last year as well. And we're going to be adding a 4th faculty member as well in this coming year. This is just better for our facilitators. It's really hard to be the only person with a class all weekend long. It's a lot. And it also will help our classes have a more dynamic experience of the material, and also be able to listen in, I think, a more focused way to the community members that we're engaging with. So that's sort of a light look at the current fellows program as it stands. There's a lot of changes underway in terms of how we fund it as well. Because of the emergent nature of who's in the room now, we have big need for scholarships, and for us to lower that paywall barrier that has existed for ALF Oregon in the past. And that's something I'm very, very excited about, and also riveted to. So bringing in Indigenous leaders, leaders of color, leaders who experience disability is a big part of what I'm going to continue to do, that my predecessors set in motion. And to do that, we just need much greater accessibility to our programming in all ways. So that's a big part of what's happening next as well. I'm going to pause there and ask if there are any questions about the current fellows program before we dive into nomination processes.
Is our pattern to continue with 2 classes forever?
Probably not. It wasn't our pattern before. I know that Kendall Clausen, one of my predecessors, created the double class model. If I'm correct about that, Kelly, please, like I said, I'm new. I don't have all the information, but luckily there's a wealth of information in the room. So we've only been doing that for less than a decade. And I know that change was an emergent solution at the time, and there may be a future where we're going down to 1 class, especially if we're talking about what capacity looks like. And I'll say too, Sue, that this is a whole new world. Year 3 into the pandemic, we're really trying to understand what the community needs, what we can deliver in a way that allows us to work at our full capacity and do what we do best. So I'm totally open to the idea that we go back to a single class model if that's needed.
One other thing is that we did take a pause at 1 year
Mhm.
during, when we needed to. There was a year
Yeah.
we just didn't do a class, and that isn't the end of the world. We survived it, and it turned out that it gave us we needed the energy to then rebuild staffing. It was a change of staff, whole change of staff, and that wasn't a bad idea either.
No, I'm open to it. I work seasonally as an artist and as a mother and as a community organizer, and sometimes we need to actually take winter to like, chop wood and haul water and get ready for the season to come. So I understand that in terms of organizational health as well. I really appreciate that that sentiment, Sue, and also your wisdom about how things have transpired in the past. Other questions before I move on to the nomination process? Okay. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time. You're a senior fellow, you're the one who can nominate. You're the only one who can nominate. And so the way this works out is that you'll fill out a nomination form that we have a link to. It doesn't take too long, but it does take some energy. You need to know a little bit about your nominee. And the people that you are looking at in your own sphere, hopefully are people who are exhibiting some mastery in their field, some confidence in their own leadership, but also have really deep inquiry and curiosity about how to grow that leadership. And hopefully they also are really craving accountability, and they're craving a group to practice that kind of accountability inside of. Hopefully they also are curious about the other. As I've been interviewing people, I'm like, are you curious about other people? Because I think you kind of have to be if you want to be a part of ALF Oregon. And you have to want to be with people, because it is a people-powered event. It's a people-powered journey. And it's one where ultimately the people in the room make up how this thing goes. That's the opportunity before any class, is who's there. The curriculum is awesome. The people are always great. And you get to create the container. So hopefully it's somebody who's also really self-actualized. They understand at least a little bit about what they want. And you see that, you're recognizing that in them, and you're hoping, gosh, this person could really affect or impact the future of this state in their own small ways or in really big ways. So as you look at the candidates that you're thinking about nominating, I hope you're thinking about what kind of ripple effect their work in the world might have. Were they to be resourced in the way that kind of only ALF can do, which is to put them in front of people of very diverse backgrounds and help them build their capacity to have a really generative conversation across difference. So that's who we're looking for. You can nominate more than one person. Please nominate more than one person. Yes, that was a question that came up. Somebody also asked, who are you looking for? And of course, we're always looking for folks that have a really big heart for the greater good. That's the big sort of 10,000 foot view. But we're also looking for people who have traditionally been underserved, set aside, who have been othered. I'm really looking for leaders who have a perspective that comes from the communities that traditionally have been the furthest away from the power, rather than who have been in close proximity to the power. So we're always looking for rural folks. That's a big, huge piece of the puzzle. We're a nonpartisan organization, and we cannot do our best work if we are Willamette Valley focused. We cannot do our best work if we are a group of white people. That will never, ever accomplish the mission of ALF. We cannot do our best work if we have hegemony or homogenization anywhere, really. So we're looking for folks of color. We're looking for leaders who experience disability. We are looking for leaders who hold intersectional identities. We're looking for folks who come from the LGBTQ community, who are come from the immigrant community, from all walks of Oregon life. I will also say that we are working at our learning edge in terms of creating environments where everyone has a little bit of what they need at ALF Oregon. So part of my work as a disability justice activist in the past has been to create accessible, like wildly accessible environments for people who want to engage in this kind of work. And so that's my work now. And we do have some barriers that we are working actively right now to open up. And that's part of my work with the board. We have a strategic planning retreat coming up, and we're looking at ALF Oregon and all of its programs through how to operationalize accessibility. So that can look like a lot of things, but right now it's going to look like us being very attentive to the specific people that are going to be in the next class, doing an accessibility assessment with them and partnering with them to make sure that we're attending to all of their access needs. And that's going to look a lot of ways depending on who ends up in the class. So if you're thinking about nominating people who do experience disability, invisible or visible, if you're thinking about nominating folks who have traditionally been cut out of this kind of experience, please let us know that, and we will have a deep and meaningful conversation with them about what access looks like for them and make sure that we are able to provide it. If I'm going to say yes to someone walking into this experience, then I want to make sure in all ways that we are attending to their needs. To that
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, we're also with this new co-facilitation model, our faculty is going to do some trauma-informed care work to make sure that we're able to sort of ethically hold space for folks who are coming in on the backside of a pandemic. I mean, what I'm noticing now from the current classes is there is collective grief that needs to be attended to. And our ability to hold that space is sometimes robust and sometimes not, depending on the capacity of the moment. So it is an emergent thing that we're trying to hold right now, but I really want to get out ahead of that for incoming classes. And it's just a part of gathering with anybody right now, is that there's collective grief, there's collective trauma. And so when you bring a group of leaders together who are already busier than busy and at their learning edge, we want to make sure that they have the kind of care, feeding, tending, and understanding that they need to engage in a meaningful way. So, any thoughts or questions about that?
Sarah, thank you for addressing how ALF might attend to candidates who are alter abled. One person who asked me to nominate them does have physical disabilities that would prevent them from climbing the mountain during community building week. And I certainly wouldn't want them to feel left out, or that their experience was different, because that's how they experience the world, and it should not be how they experience ALF. And, you know, I wasn't sure how to answer that question when I talked with him before. So it sounds like that is an ongoing conversation and is a little bit fluid, but I do think I can a little bit more confidently invite him to be nominated or to be a candidate. I just wasn't sure how that would work.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
It's, you know, I have twofold mind about this. I'm sort of a build the road by walking it kind of person. And I also know that we need to lay some train track before we invite the train in sometimes. And so track laying for me is about accessibility. I myself have a child who is non-ambulatory and nonverbal. And so I'm disability adjacent for sure in terms of his physical capacity. And it was one of the first things I noticed when I did my own community building week. And also as a person of size who has a respiratory condition, I thought, oh my gosh, I think I'm not meant for this, or maybe I don't belong here, right? It was a question in my own mind. And so there are lots of ways that we can cue belonging. And one of them is to say, let's get up this mountain together, whatever that looks like, rather than who is healthy enough, right? Or like has the capacity to make this mountain trip in a single way. So that's the beauty of ALF too, is also how we co-create systems where everybody can get there.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So the nomination process, you'll make your submission. You can do that online, or you can just call me up and we can have a conversation too. Some of you have already done that and said, I just want to talk to you and tell you about my nominees and give you their contact information, and then I can reach out. But the second most important part of that is not just the submission, but your homework. Your job as an ALF Senior Fellow is to talk to that person and say, hi, I'm really excited about your leadership. Share with them about your experience of the program. Be honest with them and share with them what you loved about it and what the opportunity actually is for them. And like I said, it's a relational one. The opportunity is a relational one. And then also let them know that you've nominated them and that we'll be reaching out to them. It's so much easier for us if there's a little bit of, if you've laid a few paving stones to them to help them better understand the opportunity before them and that it's an honor to be nominated. And also they'll be able to prepare their own questions for me, which is always really helpful. It means that my conversations with them are far more generative and effective. So please do let them know that you've nominated them, and then we reach out to them very shortly. We'll go ahead and be emailing to the whole Senior Fellow Network a calendar that we're, just please get your nominations in by, for instance, February 15th, and we're going to be interviewing everybody before mid-April. And as in years past, they'll do an interview with the executive director, and then they'll do an interview with another senior fellow or a board member. And there's usually multiple conversations that happen, as you know, as being senior fellows yourself before they receive their acceptance letter. So that's still the process at this time. I'm trying to meet with folks in person if I can, but a lot of it's also happening over Zoom. But I also like Zoom because it's really accessible and I can get to everybody across the state. So it's helpful for me as a rural person as well. So any questions about the nomination process? Yes, Sue.
We talked at some point about being a tuition neutral, I think was the word. I think Lisa tried to, earlier we were really expecting or looking for who could pay. I mean, that was part of the, so how are you handling that? Or how do we collectively handle that? Let's say it's not just up to you.
Absolutely.
How would we like that to be handled? There you go.
So part of my work right now too, and I have board members here on the call, so if you'd like to speak to this as well, you're welcome to. But we haven't lifted up our tuition cost in over 8 years. It's been $10,000 a year. And so right now we're actually operating, I would say, a little bit behind what the actual cost of the program is. And in terms of talking with folks about the fee, about the tuition, feel free to say there's a tuition attached, there's a fee involved, there is a cost for being a part of it, and that tuition can be realized in many ways, and it can. We're an enormously adaptive organization in terms of how we can help people with that funding. And you can share with them. They do have scholarships available. They are doing work with foundations, especially if you have intersecting identities that really resonate with those foundations and the folks we're trying to bring in. We have support for Indigenous leaders and rural leaders and leaders of color. And also it matters if you are supported by an organization or not. Please let them know if they're with an organization, that they need to look into funds from their own organization that are about continuing education and continuity of opportunity for them. Because a lot of times there's money available that they don't even know is available through their own organizations. And investment, right, can look a lot of ways. In total transparency, I'm pretty much an anti-capitalist. So I would love for this program to be a $0, zero paywall opportunity. It's not there yet. And also we need to raise the tuition. I would like, and this is me just opening up my sort of executive director brain and being really transparent here, is that I would like to have an equity tier so that we have folks who are like me, who are unaffiliated with an organization, who are living below the poverty line in rural Eastern Oregon, with a partner who didn't work, who did community organizing work at a grassroots level. I would have loved for there to have been an equity option. Luckily, I had a full scholarship. That was incredible. It made it it made it possible for me to participate wholly. I wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. And I want those full scholarships to continue to be available to leaders like me. And I also think we need to have a tiered situation where we have an equity price or equity tuition, where we have a sustainer tuition, which is folks who have more than the usual resources, who know that they're giving back, and that there's a standard as well of like what the actual cost of the program is. So people can understand a little bit more about where they fit in terms of being able to invest in this work. So please let them know there are a myriad of ways for the tuition to be realized. It can come from them, it can come from organizations, it can come from foundations, it can come from scholarships. And then we also have people who are supported or sponsored. I'm working on putting together my own sponsorship for my own candidate that I would love to bring into the program, so that they know that I believe in them. And so I'm coming in with a certain dollar amount to help them realize their tuition. So that's also a possibility.
And what about, travel? Do we discuss travel? Because that,
in each of my interviews with recruitments, to your point about admitting or confessing, I don't want there ever to be a moment where you have to admit anything or confess anything. I want to have the conversation out front and say, hey, these are the ways in which we can support you. There's a travel fund that we make available to folks who need support with hotel. We encourage carpooling, and we put you in touch with folks who are carpooling from your area. It's hard for rural people. I will say no one was carpooling from halfway Oregon. So I really had to come up with my own way of moving through the world with ALF. And Lisa was really great about having transparent conversations with me. She came to me and said, listen, I know this is probably an issue that we need to address, and there's no shame around it. And let's get you where you need to be and when. And so I aim to have those same conversations where we just put it out there without any source of shame or any source of having, I don't want anyone to have to confess anything. I want to just meet their needs. So those are the kinds of conversations I have in my recruitment conversations with nominees.
And I don't know if it helps or not, but I'm one of the board members that Sarah mentioned is on the call, or maybe the board member. I've done my nominations already for this year, and I was just totally upfront with folks and said there is a cost. You are expected to contribute, and the cost is not going to be a barrier to your participation. And here's what my experience was. And one of the things that I can't tell them is, what does it cost to do all the travel? Because I was in one of the all virtual pandemic classes, but so I've been just totally upfront with everybody about that, just to make sure that they understand part of what they're thinking about getting into.
And that kind of transparency is important across the board. This is a consent-based situation. Folks need to know what they're saying yes to, and they need to know what the real opportunity is before them. And so my intention always is to be the front line of that transparency. And so I want these relationships to be mutual care relationships rather than transactional. And in terms of the longevity of the Senior Fellow Network and the manner in which we engage with each other, if we lay that groundwork in their fellow year, then I hope that's what ripples away from that inception moment for them. So questions about who you're thinking about nominating. If I would love to brainstorm folks in your area. Again, we're thinking about people who are deeply curious, who have already an understanding of who they are in the world and what they want to do. Not that ALF isn't a place to come sort of figure out your big why, but usually this kind of investment of time, especially, you've already got a big why. You already sort of have an understanding of the trajectory of your leadership, at least, if not your career. How many people had career moves in ALF? I see so many people have career moves in ALF, and I think it's because they know their big why and they're in the wrong place. And so actually there's like a clarification that happens at ALF, and they sort of make a right turn in their career, but their big why is still absolutely intact, if not more robust than it was before. So we do see that a lot as well. Questions about nominees?
I don't have any particular people in mind. I mean, people come to my mind. And sometimes there are people who, may not be in a professional role as a leader. And so then I wonder, it feels like that's one of the things that is expected of anyone who participates, or maybe anyone who wasn't might feel like they didn't fit in when they got there, because the other participants are going to be the executive director of their organization, or they are at a different place in their career. So I was curious about that. And yeah, just thinking about how comfortable people would be in the group.
I want to say about that, folks who are leaders regardless of whether they are, they have a title or some kind of status-driven name after their name. I'm really interested in community organizers who are doing grassroots work. I'm really interested in leaders who are on the ground, who understand what it means to be facilitating people-powered solutions in their own communities. I mean, you know me in Halfway. We don't have companies in Halfway, but we have some incredible community leaders, but nobody is overseen by a board. Nobody is funded by an organization. They're out there doing their good and proper and passionate work for the community, and they're leaders. Those are the people I would love to have here. And I actually think that corporations and nonprofits and people who have a more codified way of leading in the state could learn a lot, especially from rural leaders who have been told that they need to just go figure it out by the state without funding and without support. And they've been doing it for years, actually, in really interesting and multilateral ways that I think Willamette Valley and urban centers could really learn from. So I would love to hear who your nominees might be, and we can talk about the ways in which we could support them and make sure that they understand their inherent value. And I want them. That was me. I mean, I stepped into this executive director role because I'm really passionate about the work that ALF was doing, but I did also swear 5 years ago I would never step into a nonprofit leadership role again, and I would just be a grassroots community organizer, but here I am. So I will say we really want and need that voice at ALF Oregon. Awesome.
Sarah, do you think it would be helpful to have something on the website, because the tuition is on the ALF website? Do you think it would be helpful to have as a note about it? It is on the website, right?
It is. And I will tell you all that a lot of my work right now, especially since I'm in the first blush of my first 3 months and I'm looking at all of our systems or lack of systems with fresh eyes, my understanding of what is on the web and what is actual is that there's a gap, a really big gap in terms of storytelling. And so my work, especially as a storyteller, and as I look through that lens, is to tell a more complete story about the ALF experience, what it is, how it was built, how it sustains itself, and what the future looks like for this organization. And this is an emergent, fluid, living organization that has been through many organizational cycles. And so it does need a refresher. And you're going to be seeing a lot of new literature out, and it's a slow process because we're a very small team. But as I head into a strategy session with the board, and as they think about their work in the future and what my work looks like in terms of reflecting the core values of ALF Oregon, you're going to see the storytelling change, especially over the next 6 months. And that's just the nature of having a new director, and also understanding that things are different now. It's not foundationally different, right? Our core values have really remained the same, but the how we do our work is really dynamically changing. And so I want to reflect that in our forward-facing materials. So thanks for your patience while we update that, but also I want to do it in a way that's that really honors who's been here and what the intention is of the ALF Oregon of right now. Thank you, everybody. So appreciate your time. Please let me know if you have questions. You know how to reach me. You've got my calendar and my cell phone and my email and all the things, and I'm here. for you and with you.